Hey guys, it's Shane here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the price elasticity of demand. You'll typically encounter this in a college level microeconomics course, probably first, maybe second year. Anyways, we represent price elasticity of demand with a capital E and then a subscript D. Price elasticity of demand is a measure of the responsiveness of quantity demanded um, based on a change in price. So if a price goes from say $5 to $2, and the quantity changes with that, well, we can get a measure of what the elasticity of that demand, the price elasticity of that demand is. Um, and there's two main ways to calculate this. Traditionally, it's basically just percent change of quantity all over the percent change of price. The problem is, depending on which order uh, you do your calculation, you might get a different number. So to make up for that, we have a midpoint method. We call this midpoint in economics, and it just divides it by the average between the two. And so that way, no matter what way you do the calculation, you'll get the same number. And so this is pretty straightforward. I'll just do perhaps the first 2 points. We can see that quantity at 1, our price is roughly 8. Don't worry, this is not drawn to scale. And then quantity 2, price roughly 7. And so what would our price elasticity of demand be? Well, the change in quantity is 1, because, from 1 to 2, we have 1 all over the first one plus second one divided by 2, so that's 3 over 2, and that's the quantity portion. Now for the price portion, the change is -1, although this won't matter, and I'll show you in a second why the negative doesn't matter, all over the first price plus the second divided by 2. And so that's 8 plus 7, that's 15 over 2. And so this will flip from 3 over 2 to 2 over 3, and this will flip to -2 over 15, and that becomes 2 over 3 times 15 over -2. 2's are going to cancel. Basically, you get -15 over 3. We take the absolute value of this, and we can see that our price elasticity of demand is 5. And what does this mean? Well, this means that it's very elastic, and we can see that here. The price goes down by $1. Let's just say this is in dollars, and basically the quantity demanded doubled. Went from 1 to 2. That's a pretty big jump there, and it's very elastic. So now I want to talk a little bit about how you can gauge elasticity or inelasticity based on what the graphs are going to look like, or what they will look like. So let's say we have 3 graphs. Excuse my axes here. And let's say, okay, well, these are all price and quantity for each of them. Let's say we have a horizontal line. Well, pick any 2 points, doesn't really matter. And we can see that there's a pretty big change in quantity, but there's actually no change, or relatively no change, in price. And so what do you think the elasticity is going to be of this? Well, the change in quantity is going to be a great number, and the change in price is going to be a small number. And when you have a big number over a small number, say like 100 over 1, it's definitely going to be greater than 1. So in this case, we actually call this perfectly elastic. I'll just write elastic, and ED is greater than 1. Now let's say we have a vertical line here. Well, quantity doesn't change at all, or almost nothing. We can see that here. And price is going to change a lot, if you pick any 2 points. So, the change in quantity is going to be next to nothing. Let's just say it's close to 0 over a big number. It can be any big number, but 5 or whatever. Well, what happens when you have a small number over a big number, or that number gets even bigger? That's going to approach 0 or close to 0. So we call this graph here, the second one, perfectly inelastic in this case, or just inelastic. And this is where the elasticity of demand is, well, greater or equal to 0, but less than 1. So ED greater or equal to 0, or ED less than 1. And lastly, we have something that we call unit elastic. And that's where, for every change in price, we have an equal change in quantity. And this is where ED is equal to 1. Looks somewhat like this graph, but as we can see, it's not quite, I didn't draw it to scale in this case. But these are basically the 3 main graphs for price elasticity of demand. You have your elastic here, then you have inelastic, and you have unit elastic. But there's actually a way that you can kind of guess or predict, or reason towards, I should say, whether or not something will be more elastic or whether or not it will lean towards more inelastic. And remember that elasticity, at least price elasticity of demand, is a measure of the responsiveness of the quantity demanded here. How will quantity change based on how price changes? I'm sorry, how will quantity demanded change based on how price changes? And if you think about this logically, it makes perfect sense. First, well, it depends on whether or not a good or a service is a luxury. Think about, like, if you have a, say, $100 t-shirt and that price changes to, or actually better yet, let's look at something recent that happens nearly every Black Friday. Beats headphones are like what, $180, $200 retail, and every Black Friday, the price gets pretty much cut in half, if not more, like 60% off, down to less than $100, and the quantity demanded skyrockets. It's very elastic. At least from what I see, I don't have any hard numbers on that, but every Black Friday store I've been to, I see the Beats sell out pretty fast. It makes you wonder what kind of profit margins they're pulling even with that discount. But yeah, anyways, one thing that is more likely to be elastic, either a good or service, is a luxury good or service. Likewise, we could say, well, if it's a necessity, it's probably going to be inelastic. Quantity demanded won't change based on how price changes for most necessities. You're going to need food. You're going to need water. You're going to need you're going to need to pay certain bills. So if the price changes, well, for most people, tough luck. You're still going to have to buy it. The quantity demanded will not change. Another thing that makes something more elastic will be if there's a longer time period. The reason for this is because, well, consumers have time to adapt. Maybe their income goes up or it goes down. Some new reasons come along for buying the good or service or not buying it. The demand for that good or service could change because something is more likely to happen in a longer amount of time given. And we can also say, in a shorter time period, something could be more likely to be inelastic. If you need something in the next 5 hours and you really need it, I guess it kind of depends if it's a necessity too. But there'll be less time for something to come up and affect the quantity demanded. Perhaps, the greater the portion of a consumer's budget that the item or service cost could affect it. If it's like 80% of your budget and then you're like, oh man, that's a lot of money. I can't afford it as it is, but then it goes up. It's like, oh well, I just can't buy it at all. Kind of, you can take into account more than one of these factors. Well, it could be a large portion of your budget, but it could also be a necessity, and then you run into issues where it's not as predictable as to whether or not it'll be more elastic or inelastic. These are to be taken as more as general guidelines. They're not exact, they're not some type of law that is always true in all cases. They're just more to be used as guidelines. But something's, we can take the opposite of that, and well, if it's a lower amount of the consumer's budget, it'll probably be more inelastic. If something only costs like $1 and your daily budget is $20 and the price goes up to like $1.50 or $2 and it's still a small portion of your budget, you're probably not likely to let that impact your demand for the item. And these are just some a few ways to tell. I'm sure there's more. I'm not going to go into all of them because there's probably an infinite amount, logically speaking. But I want to talk about an interesting implication of price elasticity of demand, and that involves total revenues. If you don't know, total revenue is equal to price times quantity. And the graph, let me redo those axes, those are horrible. The graph looks, let's just take a unit elastic demand curve. It looks something like this not for total revenue. This is our demand curve. The total revenue is going to look something like this. Kind of like a hill, I guess you could say. Well, what's interesting is that this tells us that, where it's equal to 1 is the optimal point for total revenues. This is what we call a maximum in calculus. So that means if you go anywhere else along this curve, like price goes up or price goes down, you could potentially be getting lower revenues. Let's say you move price to over here, and that affects demand, and now your total revenues are down to here. One common misconception is that a firm will raise prices, no matter what, to always make the most amount of money. That's not necessarily true. If they raise price, quantity demanded could go down, and overall their total revenue could go down. And the same could hold true if they lower the price. But you can't just lower a raised price or just keep raising the price as much as you want to get more in total revenues. That's not how it works. It's got we already looked at what makes things more elastic or inelastic and how that could affect quantity demanded. But yeah, one common misconception that I see going around is that, oh yeah, some company, will always raise the price, they can make the most amount of money. And that's just simply not true. But anyways, that pretty much sums up my quick introduction to price elasticity of demand. I covered basically how to do a quick calculation using it, using the data given, how to read the graphs. You have inelastic, you have elastic, and you have unit elastic. I covered how to kind of tell if something will be more elastic or more inelastic, and then I kind of talked about a implication using total revenue. Anyways, that's it for my video on the price elasticity of demand. If you felt like this helped you, I would greatly appreciate it if you left a like on it, maybe even subscribed. I'm going to be making some more economics and accounting and other finance related videos in the future. Anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching my video.